So this talk is focused on teaching children specific skills, well, not just children, teaching children and adults specific skills that they can use to keep themselves safe. However, I want to make sure that we're verbalizing here that it's not just the child's responsibility to keep themselves safe. It involves a lot of parties, right? A lot of people are involved. And I think that this visual really depicts it well. So in the center, we have the individual, because we definitely can acknowledge that it is possible for our clients to learn body safety skills. It's possible to teach them how to report abuse, how to be aware of red flags, how to avoid dangerous situations, how to physically get out of a dangerous situation. But there are other layers to abuse prevention than simply the child. So we also have caregivers and parents, and they have a responsibility as well to make sure that they're creating an environment where the child is safe. And so I think it's good to be aware of this, especially when we're looking at doing parent and caregiver trainings, because these are things we can include, especially if we're teaching some of these safety strategies or teaching our students to identify some of these unsafe situations. Let's make sure the caregivers are also involved in that and aware of what's going on. And then organizations like schools, churches, group homes, ABA clinics, these programs also have a responsibility to create environments where abuse is structurally harder to perpetrate. And that can be seen in the policies and safeguards and procedures that they have in place. And then the last line of defense is society, making sure that we have rules and legislation in place that is supporting environments where abuse cannot happen, and making sure that we are having consequences in place when abuse does happen so that we can keep children safe. So it's definitely multifaceted. Today we're going to be talking about helping our clients read internal cues of danger and safety, and how that strategy can be added into our toolbox when we're looking at how to teach some of these body safety skills. Which begs the question if there's room for this in ABA. And my personal opinion is that there is room for inner experiences in ABA, because inner experiences are going to influence those outward observable behaviors, but also because we're able to use outward behaviors in order to identify what is going on internally. So this leads to our discussion on interoception. This graphic shows 8 different sensory systems that we have in our body. And sensory systems are essentially just the way that our body takes in and processes information, both from the world around us, but also from inside our own bodies. Most of the sensory systems are going to take information from the outside world, for instance, what we see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. But there are some other processes or sensory systems which gather information from inside the body. So proprioception is going to give us information about where our body is in space, and the vestibular system is what manages movement and balance, and then interoception, which is what we'll be talking about for the rest of the time, is an internal sense. So to put it concretely, if someone taps you on the shoulder, that's your tactile system. If you are going to reach behind you to grab something without looking, that's proprioception. That's your proprioceptive system telling you where your arm is in space. And if you feel your heart racing or a knot in your stomach because something doesn't feel right, that's interoception. So essentially, interoception is our body's ability to sense, interpret, and respond to our internal body signals. These are some examples of how interoception works in our everyday life. So on the left-hand side, you'll see a column that says sensing, so sensing or noticing. If we notice that our stomach is clenching, then we interpret this as hunger, and then we respond by going and getting food. Or if we notice that we have heavy eyes and a really slow body, then we interpret that as being tired, and we might respond by lying down or going and getting a drink of water. So all of these internal cues are giving us information. And what's important to remember is that it's not just giving us information about hunger or being tired. It also is giving us information about fear and anxiety. So your body doesn't just track hunger, it tracks danger too, which is why teaching interoceptive skills is so important when it comes to abuse prevention. Now we're going to talk about behavior-based approaches to teaching body safety skills. A behavior-based approach is a curriculum or an approach that teaches a client a fixed set of rules to follow or teaches them to look out for very specific cues that indicate that someone is dangerous. So for instance, a purely behavior-based approach might teach a client that someone who tries to use coercion to get them to do something that they don't want to do is dangerous, and that when the child sees that behavior, that's their cue that they need to get away and tell someone they trust. So we're teaching the client very specific behaviors to watch out for and then very specific responses. So these approaches definitely have their place, especially for some of our clients that are very rule-based and need things that are very black and white. These approaches are effective, but they're really only addressing one piece of a larger whole. They're only teaching a client to be aware of others' outward behaviors. And we think that it is a better approach to also teach children to be aware of their internal sensations that are giving them clues of safety and danger instead of merely relying on someone's outward behaviors. So when we teach children or our clients to notice their internal cues, we're really giving them skills that can protect them earlier in dangerous situations before things escalate. And we're also giving them something that rules alone can't. We're helping them build this internal safety system that is going to work in a lot of situations, not just situations that we've specifically prepared them for and taught them through. Because we can't anticipate every scenario, right? We can't teach every rule, but their body will respond and their body will be able to detect instances of danger that we might not have prepared them for using some of these purely behavior-based approaches. There are lots of different behavior-based programs out there, but these are the three that we're going to go over today: No Go Tell, Good Touch, Bad Touch, and relationship sorting programs. The no-go-tell strategy is when we're teaching clients how to recognize inappropriate behavior, say no to that person that might be trying to give them an unsafe request or coercion, and then we teach them to get away from that person and tell a trusted adult. So in the published ABA literature, we see this a lot. It's called behavioral skills training. Raymond Miltenberger is an author to look for. He's done a lot of research in this area and using behavior skills training to teach these responses. And we know that behavior skills training can be effective. There is research to show that. And no-go-tell is a purely behaviorist approach. It tells a child what to do when they recognize danger, but there are some flaws with that. So firstly, it assumes that the child can recognize danger. So no-go-tell really only activates once a child has already identified a situation as unsafe. But what we know from the grooming literature is that abuse rarely looks dangerous initially. So it begins with familiar people, often doing things that might look safe, offering a lot of praise, offering a lot of gifts, offering a lot of attention. We usually don't teach that those behaviors are bad, right, in some of these approaches. And so these initial grooming behaviors might not look unsafe. And so a child that's following the no-go-tell rule is waiting for a moment of clear danger, when ideally we want to teach them strategies that are going to get them out of a situation before it even gets that bad. So with the no-go-tell approach, we're really also assuming that the person is able to get away. And we know from the literature as well that abuse is often perpetrated by people who are in a caregiving role. And it's not easy to get away from someone that you are reliant on for care. Additionally, especially in programs that focus on compliance, we're specifically teaching clients often to be compliant with people that are in authority. And so if abuse is happening from someone in authority, we may actually be asking a lot of them when we expect them to stand up to that person and say no and then run away. So the rule is not looking at some of the nuances that really happen in these abusive situations, and it doesn't address how to handle abuse when you're unable to actually get away, or when the abuse is coming from someone that's in a position of authority. And so the bottom line is that the no-go-tell approach is a useful starting point, but it is an insufficient end point, and it needs to be supplemented with interoceptive awareness so that clients can detect some of these early warning signals.